Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. I'm Lisa Friend, and along with my fabulous colleagues, Julianne Worden, Ben Green, and Gabe Gunnick, we're here and happy to invite you as a community of Monday Night Travelers to our first destination duel, where we will debate the merits of Europe's top 2 destinations. Before we begin, I'd like to hand it over to Ben for a moment.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I would like to just make a few introductory remarks. First, as always, remember that you can find and register for future episodes of Monday Night Travel at ricksteves.com/MNT. And now over to Julianne to introduce the debate.
Well, we did want to give you a little bit of history about this debate before we began, because it has been a long-running debate amongst us here who work at Rick Steves Europe. So it started a few years ago when my coworker Stephanie innocently asked us, what do you prefer, Paris or London? And then from there, it just kind of blew up into this large debate office-wide. And we even ended up asking Rick, which is his favorite, but we won't share those results until the end. And so we are excited to see what the viewers tonight think, to see if they're on the Paris side or on the London side of things. And we just wanted to state that while this evening we are leaning in the direction of one city or another, they both hold special places in our hearts.
Yes, as Julianne said, all 4 of us love both of these cities, but tonight we are in it to win it. So we are putting our debate hats on, and we are going to do our darndest to argue for our chosen city.
Cheers to that. Cheers.
Cheers to that, Ben.
Cheers, Gabe.
All right. Well, this debate is going to follow a strict format. Each team is going to begin with opening statements in which they begin to set the stage for why their city is the best in Europe. After that, we are going to debate London and Paris in 5 categories: ease of travel, history, architecture, art and architecture, cuisine, and entertainment. After each category, we're going to make our arguments. Whichever team spoke first is going to have time for a brief rebuttal. And after that rebuttal, we turn to you all, our audience. You're going to have a chance to vote for which city you think is stronger in each of these 5 categories. Then, after we make our closing statements, you're going to have one more vote for overall impression. After we've made all our arguments, that's when you tell us which city you most want to visit on your next European vacation. So overall, each one of the 5 categories will count for 10% of the final score, and the overall impression will count for 50%. So even if you came in tonight with some preconceptions about which city is your favorite, we encourage you to have an open mind and maybe even split your ticket between the 2 cities on a category by category basis. We don't want you to be too fair-minded though. Please feel free to chime in the Q&A with some playful banter about which city is your favorite and why. Now, without further ado, we are going to get started with our opening statements. And I have the privilege of kicking things off by telling you why Paris is the most magical city in all of Europe. Now, one wondering why Paris is the most magical need only look at the nicknames for Paris: City of Light and City of Love. Paris's nickname as the City of Light goes back to the 17th century when the city added more streetlights and lanterns to improve public safety. And it gained new meaning during the Enlightenment period when Paris became a hub of Enlightenment ideals. So Paris was both physically and philosophically enlightened. And this is something that Paris continues to this day. In fact, Paris has nearly 300 illuminated monuments throughout the city and is home to many of the world's best universities and top art institutes. Now, Paris's identity as the city of love needs no explanation. One needs simply stroll through its park or along the banks of the Seine to feel the pulsing romance of the city. Now, let's consider London's nicknames. We have, and this you can Google this, they pop up first, the Big Smoke, referring to London's dirty industrialism. Reykjavik on the Thames, referring to London's financial instability in the 21st century, and my personal favorite, the Great Wen, using the medieval term for boil to describe London's swelling size. So while London smokes and swells, Paris glitters and enchants.
Very well said, Gabe. Thank you. In summary, tonight we will bedazzle you with the wonders of Paris. We'll learn how this city of light shines as a beacon of art, cuisine, fashion, and even democracy. As part of the original European economic community, Paris's integration with Europe is a boon for travelers. Its 2,000-year-old history contains world-altering moments like the French Revolution and the rise of modern democracy. It has been a destination for artists for centuries, and its architecture is equally renowned and beautiful. Paris offers a myriad of food experiences based on fresh, local, and specialized ingredients. We will share with you why Paris has remained the undisputed principal French capital city for centuries, and why it is truly the superior travel destination.
Lisa and Julianne, over to you.
Well, that is a strong statement. I don't remember London ever being called Reykjavik on the Thames before. But imagine, if you will, that London is a city that we have known about our whole lives. I'm sure I'm not the only one who was raised on stories of Peter Pan flying over the rooftops, of Mary Poppins, nursery rhymes about London Bridge, and Winnie the Pooh. Our knowledge of London comes from literature and from something the U.S. Embassy calls our special relationship, signifying that London is the capital of our closest ally. Our common language makes London more approachable. It's easier to make friends and meet people and feel the pulse of this diverse and exciting city. Because when we're talking about London, there's something for everyone. Museums on all kinds of subjects, the old meeting the new, like Dale Chihuly's fabulous glass sculpture at the Victoria and Albert with a Gothic altar, St. Paul's linking the Thames over the Jubilee Bridge, and a medieval castle right in the center of town.
And after seeing so many wonderful sights and experiencing this city, you want to have the time to contemplate everything that you've seen and experienced. And in London, you can do so in one of its many beautiful and grand parks that are the perfect calm place to think about your day. Like St. James's here, the previous image was Kensington and Hyde Park. And what better way to wind down after a long day of fulfilling your travel dreams than to go to a pub where you can relive these memories with newly made friends who do speak English. And so you can share stories with people that you just met and that you can connect on a different level, since you do share the same language. And in London, history is alive and really tangible. It's rare to find a place where there are so many performances and traditions that are still being lived to this day that have been carried on for centuries and centuries. So you're learning not only in museums, but also you're just walking about in the city, breathing in this history. And London doesn't need a nickname. While Paris might have a lot of fancy nicknames, I have to say, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So London is London, and it doesn't need a nickname.
Who wrote that quote?
But it has them.
No one's heard of them.
Might not need them, but it has them.
I believe it's an Englishman, Lisa, William Shakespeare.
Oh, yes. And the author Samuel Johnson wrote, "When a man is tired of London, he's tired of life."
Ooh, okay.
So London will clearly dominate tonight's debate.
Resorting to personal attacks. Game on, Ben.
Absolutely. How can you put an X to the Eiffel Tower, Julianne?
Well, to start things off, we often get questions at work from fellow travelers who are wondering about kind of the basics of visiting a place. How to get around is one of the biggest things. What type of money do you use? The transportation that's available. So we thought we'd kick things off this evening with the category of ease of travel. And as you can see here in London, London has a lot of different options for getting around that are easy for travelers to use, especially lacking that language barrier. So they have the classic double-decker buses that light up the London skyline with their bright red color. And they have the tube, but they also have the black taxis, which are really an enriching part of visiting this city. You might not think a taxi would be, but the drivers have to go through an extensive testing process to be certified to be a black cab driver. And so you can hop in one of these, call them all around the city. They're easy to call and
just hail them.
And they have such a deep knowledge of this city that it's really a treat to take one. So we highly recommend taking a black taxi cab.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Rick says that he won't go to London without taking at least one taxi ride while he visits, just because they're so valuable.
And of course, there is the tube. Here's Lisa enjoying the tube.
I'm telling my mother-in-law where to go in a good way. So London's tube is very well organized. It's split up into zones, but zone 1 and zone 2 are the major zones that a tourist will use. And it's inside this area that's shaped like a bottle laying on its side. So here it is. This is the tube circle line, but all kinds of lines will go across the city. You can get from one end of London to the other. It will take you a little bit longer than Paris because it is a bigger city, because London started out as the Roman city in the east and the royal city in the west and grew together. So it's like an infinity symbol. But you can use an Oyster card, right? You can use an Oyster card on the tube, on the buses. They don't even accept cash on the buses. Or you can use your phone to do contactless, or even my favorite, is your watch. So you download the TfL web, app and get your tickets that way. Here's Julianne being an A student, sitting on the tube. She's following along her journey with the well-signed tube map up above. And then this is great in both cities, because when you're in a big underground station, you need to know which exit you want to go above ground. And you'll see on the left, there is the exit guide and exit 1. If you want to go to Westminster Bridge, it's very easy. You want to go to the House of Parliament, you're going to take exit 3. And Paris has the same situation. It's called the Plan du Quartier. And it's going to tell me where the exits are in French. So I think that London transportation is far easier than Paris transportation.
A tip for looking at this Plan du Quartier is to learn the French phrase, je suis perdu, which means I'm lost. And a benefit of being in London, if you've spent a nice amount of time in the city and want to have something a little different, is the day trips that are available from the city. Easy to take on trains. Windsor, I think you said, Lisa, just takes about an hour to get out and explore this castle for a day and then come back and have an exciting evening in London. Same with Stonehenge. If you want to see a really ancient site, there's an easy train out to Bath, or you can do day tours out to Stonehenge directly from London. And so there are some excellent options to get out into outside of the city.
Can I add a day trip that some of our viewers may be interested if they watched the show that Gabe did with Robert Helkin? You can get to York, England in 2 hours on a high-speed train, so it's very easy. When you're in Britain, if you're in London and you want to go outside the city, one of the ways that England is far superior to France is the rail passes work very well. They save you money, and they give you flexibility, whereas in France, the trains are very expensive, and a rail pass doesn't give you any flexibility because you still have to make your seat reservations months in advance. The other great thing about London is that it has 5 or 6 airports, and it is a hub for these budget airlines like EasyJet, Ryanair. So you can easily catch a flight for $120 to get to Barcelona or to get to Rome. Very easy to move around the continent from London.
Not only is there the airports, but there's also the Eurostar train, which can take you through the tunnel over to Paris in just a few hours, even all the way up to Amsterdam. So that's a great option. Also not having to deal with a flight too if you want to get to the mainland. And interestingly, the cost difference, sometimes in the past, you might have thought of pounds as being a better or a worse value than the euro. But in recent years, it has dipped down. And we were looking in the Rick Steves London and Paris guidebooks, and we're interested to see that Rick's price per day per person in London was $30 lower than the price per person per day in Paris. So in London, Rick estimated it to be $225 per person, while in Paris is $255 per person. So more bang for your buck in London.
Absolutely.
Ben, Julian mentioned a Eurostar trip to Paris. That sounds pretty great to me.
It
Does that sound good to you?
It does indeed.
All right, well, let's learn more.
Well, speaking of high-speed trains, in France, all roads lead to Paris. From the French capital, high-speed train service whisks you across the country in a few hours. Here we see estimated full fare prices, but tickets are cheaper in advance. High-speed trains also connect to several neighboring countries, including Germany, Spain, Belgium, Netherlands, and yes, as Julianne and Lisa mentioned, you can go to London as well. The TGV train, France's high-speed carriage, is one of Europe's fastest. France has the third or fourth highest amount of high-speed rail, with about 2,600 kilometers, significantly more high-speed rail than in the UK. Now, this display shows a TGV train from Switzerland to Paris traveling at 190 miles per hour, whisking you from city center to city center. I believe I checked, and I don't think any train in the UK can go quite that fast. Meanwhile, in London, almost all international routes require a more hassle-filled flight, and you have to decipher between multiple airports, as Julianne and Lisa mentioned earlier. Paris's excellent ground transportation connections make it far easier than London to include in one's overall itinerary.
All right. Well, Julianne, I'm glad that you've practiced saying that you are lost, because hopefully it helps you to say I have lost, because I've visited Paris and London multiple times, and I can say without a doubt that Paris is easier to navigate. To start things off, Paris is smaller. Paris has a population less than that of Chicago and has an area less than that of South Bend, Indiana. Meanwhile, London is bigger than Phoenix and has a population larger than New York City's. And while London looks expansive on the map, Paris is neatly snug within its ring road and is nicely divided in half by the Seine River through the center, with the left bank, or rive gauche, and the right bank, rive droit. To make things even easier, Paris is organized into 20 numbered neighborhoods called arrondissements, which begin in the center and spiral outward so that you can always find where you are on a map. And Lisa, you mentioned that London looks like an infinity sign, which makes sense because that's how long it feels like it takes for me to get places in that city. Meanwhile, in Paris, it is nicely in that smaller area. It is actually connected by more metro stations. Within Paris, there are 303 metro stations compared to London's 272, and they come with these fun, whimsical signs that add character to the city. And riding Paris's metro system is easy. Simply get one of their Navigo passes when you arrive, and they come conveniently in daily, weekly, or pay-as-you-go options. You can even download the RAPT app, which is going to tell you how to get between any 2 points in the city on public transportation, up-to-the-minute timetables, and you can even get a digital Navigo pass so that you can swipe in easily with your phone.
Fantastic. And speaking of easy travel, Gabe, France and Paris use the euro. So in addition to its proximity and value to the dollar, the euro's shared use across 19 countries, becoming 20 in January, makes it a practical currency. This makes it easy use for cash. Yes, card is used heavily in London and Paris, but depending on your broader itinerary and what and where you wish to purchase different things, some cash might be needed. And one currency across 20 nations means less time exchanging money during your trip. And I would add one more point. Lisa and Julianne mentioned signs in English in London, I would counter by saying, when I travel, Gabe, I travel for a broader perspective to see something different. I can travel to Canada, to many other places for English language, but it's nice to go to a country where things are a little different. And this is not to say London is exactly the same, of course, but I feel like I'm pushed a little further in a place like Paris. And people speak relatively good English in many services in Paris anyway. All right, back to you, Lisa and Julianne.
Oh, there's so much to unpack here. Do you mind if I start? So I am hopeful that the Navigo Pass is going to be just as efficient and speedy as my beloved Oyster card in London, but we don't know yet because it's not in service yet. They're still using paper tickets right now. Also, the arrondissements are a delightful corkscrew of planning, which no person who isn't Parisian could ever understand. If you're in London and you're in the postal code SW stands for Southwest, you immediately know what part of the city you're in. And while London is big, and we're not denying that it is, because bigger is better, but Paris is the most densely populated city. So you're going to fight for every inch of square space that you get on the metro, in a sidewalk cafe. People live very cheek to jowl, and that's fine until you're up against somebody's armpit in the metro.
And Ben mentioned that all roads lead to Paris. And in my mind, that just makes it easier to leave Paris, which you can do with their great train system. However, it is not as easy for tourists to use as it may seem. We have a little card in our office. In France, their train company is called SNCF, which means the Société Nationale des Chemins de Fer, the National Society for the Trains. However, we have a little card on our front desk that says the SNCF is the Société Nationale for Confusing Foreigners. So it does not deserve the acclaim, as Ben had mentioned. And with currency, I was just in France last December and I never once used cash. I used my card the entire time. And we were even in small villages. Everyone had the little devices that you could use your card. So I think if you're still taking out cash, you might be a little bit in the past. It's time to move forward to the contactless world.
And the euro is only an advantage if you're going outside of France, but London is so great. You're just going to spend all your time in the pound land.
Yes. And my final comment, the easy to use the metro system in Paris. I've heard the Paris metro map described before as a spilled plate of spaghetti because it's just all these lines mushed up.
And who doesn't love spaghetti?
Not tired travelers. Well, it's time to put this to a vote for our viewers at home. So, ease of travel, Paris versus London. What do you all at home think?
I don't know. You talk about being crammed, Lisa, at 6'3". I don't even really fit in one of those tube trains.
Do you fit in a Paris?
Feel pretty crammed to me. Those Paris metro cars are spacious.
Oh, they are not. You have
For
to
me,
tell
they
the
are.
truth, Gabe.
No, I genuinely believe that.
And
That's because you're head and shoulders above everyone else.
Thank you. I heard Team Paris is head and shoulders above everyone else.
I would also say that compact city center is great for travelers. They don't have to spend all day going across town. Everything they want to see is within a fairly close distance.
There's a walk I love to do in London. You go from St. Paul's over the Globe to the Borough Market, across the Tower Bridge, over to the Tower of London. You see millennia of history within not even a little walk, a beautiful walk. So I think.
Well, speaking of millennia, I think it's time for history.
Yes, I have the results here. All right.
All right. Yes, speaking of millennia, speaking of the past, I have the pleasure of introducing the next topic. We will debate one of my personal favorite genres, the all-important topic of history. Which city's history is more impressive, impactful, and/or visible for travelers today? Let's hear more about Londonian and Parisian history to find out. Now, The cafe is a fundamental part of French and Parisian economic, political, and social life. Cafes are where deals get done. Many aspects of the country have some association with the cafe, from Impressionism to the Enlightenment. Now, the cafe has been an essential part of Paris for 300 years, and obviously that remains true today. Paris's Café Procope, opened in 1694, was frequently visited by the likes of Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Rousseau, Voltaire, and others. These cafe patrons exchanged ideas and shared opinions, which helped develop the ideas of the Enlightenment. So when in Paris, exchange some new thoughts and ideas, as Rick and the crew are doing here. And these Enlightenment ideals led to the French Revolution and the rise of liberal democracy. Paris was, of course, the center of the French Revolution, beginning in 1789. Ideas such as liberté, égalité, fraternité, today the national motto of France, arose along with other components we now consider central to a liberal democracy. This created pathways for the growth of individual freedoms, as well as the birth and growth of nationalism, leading to nation states. This fundamentally altered the course of history. France and Paris were also central, I might add, to the victory of the rebels in the American War of Independence. With diplomacy from the likes of Franklin, Jefferson, and others, the French spent around the equivalent today of $13 billion to support the colonies in their rebellion. The United States truly does exist as we know it today, in part because of Parisian-based aid.
Nowadays, we have the best of both worlds. The average people are free from megalomaniacal dictators and out-of-touch royals, but they still get to enjoy their mansions and palaces while they learn about history. Take, for example, the Palace of Versailles, with its glittering hall of mirrors, its lush gardens, and its gushing fountains. Versailles used to epitomize the inaccessible luxury of royals while poor people suffered. Today, the proceeds from Versailles go to an institute that researches structures of power, goes to educating the public, and goes to staging classical music performances like operas that are affordable for the average citizen. But Versailles is not the only famous residence that you can visit. Also, an easy day trip from Paris is Napoleon's Palace of Fontainebleau. And you can also go to Monet's Garden of Giverny to see his serene lily pads up close and personal. But Monet is not the only artist that you can visit while you're in Paris. So balance out seeing some of the political sites like Versailles and Fontainebleau with celebrating some of Paris's bohemian history. So you have Père Lachaise Cemetery, one of my favorite places in Paris. It sits on 110 acres, making it the largest cemetery in France and the most visited necropolis in the world. Père Lachaise is home to some famous residents, such as writers like Gertrude Stein and Marcel Proust, as well as singers like Jim Morrison and Edith Piaf. But by far the best tombstone belongs to Oscar Wilde, whose fans stamp his tombstone with illicit lipstick kisses, which he would certainly enjoy. So Père Lachaise, it's a literal breath of fresh air between the great museums of Paris, but it also just gives you a sense of the deep, not only the deep history, but of the people in Paris that created that history.
Well, sure, Paris has a cute little history, but London's history is right in front of you. And I will never forget the first time I went to the Tower of London and just how blown away I was. This is the White Tower within the Tower of London, and its construction was completed in 1078. I don't believe there is any site in London that you can visit that is that old. And that's the thing about London, is that the history is really alive and interactive. This is also in the Tower of London. They have this for children to enjoy or the young at heart. I remember arriving at the Tower for the first time and seeing people dressed up the medieval garb and just having the best time, because it's like you're living this history and seeing how people lived thousands of years ago. So it's interesting to see. And you see the history from around 1100, but you see the history that is still continuing on to this day. And there are pros and cons of the monarchy, but I think it is special still to see the medals and the traditions and the things that have been going on for hundreds of years that you can still experience to this day, and said, I was a part of this moment in history that you see in a textbook. You can say, I was there, I was alive at this time and was in London for it. And seeing the outfits that have been used and and you're just walking around the streets in London to be able to see these things. So in London, you don't have to just read about history in a museum. You just walk out the door of your hotel or bed and breakfast, and you can go experience it for yourself.
I agree. And I don't want to harp on the fact that we speak the same language as people in London. I didn't want to seem like an egomaniac, so I didn't add this picture, but there is a picture of my son when he was 7 years old talking to one of the guards at the Tower of London, and they invited him and myself as his guardian into the Tower room and let him hold the George III lantern, which was literally older than our country. And I love France, and I'm just going to be honest, I don't have as deep or meaningful exchanges in Paris because of the language barrier. So that being said, the variety of history in London is staggering. You go from the ancient Rosetta Stone, this is the real Rosetta Stone from ancient times, to a cuddly little copy in the same building at the British Museum that you can trace your hands over. The history in London is tangible. You can also see, as Julianne mentioned, the Tower of London and walk around. And I would say also check the times, the opening times very carefully, because you can buy your tickets online. You want to get there about 20 or 30 minutes before to get in line. And then all you have to do is go through the security line and you can go straight to the crown jewels. That's very important. And then you have the replica by Sam Wanamaker of Shakespeare's Globe. So you're looking at 1600s there. And then more modern history, such as the Churchill Museum and the Cabinet War Rooms. This is a highly personal site for me. What they did is after the war was over, World War II, they closed up the doors and they left it closed for a few decades, and then they opened it up. So these are the exact telephones. Those are the papers that they were using, because this was the headquarters of the English government during the Blitz. And just down the street, you have St. Paul's, which was defended by these fabulous London firefighters getting the sticky bombs off the roof, because there was nothing Hitler wanted more than to bomb that church to smithereens. So the history is just so tangible, and it's so encompassing when you're there in London.
And building off what Lisa said about being able to connect more with people in London than in Paris, Ben mentioned sitting in cafes and people watching when you're in Paris, and it's sure nice to observe people doing other things. However, in London, you can go into any pub and you are one of the people, because you can talk with them and see where they're from and just share stories with someone who speaks your language. And with what Lisa was just mentioning about the different history that can be seen in London, this to me is what makes it even more special than Paris, because you see the scars of history in this city. They're present to this day, and they're not just the creamy veneer of the Haussmannian buildings in Paris. You can still see the history all around you.
Well, thank you very much, Julianne and Lisa. You know, I would start by saying Paris is technically older than London. So you're referencing London's early history and how people can connect with it. Well, we didn't talk too much about Paris's early history because I think it's harder to connect with in some ways. So I just think that that's what people, value, is history they can connect with. Topics like the French Revolution, aid to the colonies, it had monumental impacts that are still relevant today. And, Paris dates back to 259 BC, when it was a Celtic tribe on the banks of the Seine. It was taken over by the Romans and then the Vikings. And as we said, it was the center of the French Revolution. So I think Parisian history is dramatic, and it can be seen easily on the streets today.
You're right. That 289 AD versus 89 AD. That's big
300.
stuff. They're both Celtic towns.
300 years. That's a long time, Lisa.
Well,
I would also just add that England has a long history of warrior queens, of women in power. So you had the Celtic queen, Boadicea, you had Elizabeth I, and then Elizabeth II didn't have a lot of constitutional or political power, but she was a thread that ran through that country over, I think, 7 prime ministers. And that kind of continuity and girl power is worth mentioning.
Joan of Arc, girl power.
Very true. Very true. Early.
Good response, Gabe.
All right. Now it is time to vote for the city you feel has the most interesting, relevant, and best history.
And we will share the results of all of the polls at the end. So you'll see the results of all 6 polls at the end. All right.
Looking pretty tight.
Ooh, I know. All that great history.
I mean, there's men in
Yes.
bearskin hats.
Yes. You can hear history. You can feel it in your bones in London.
There's lots of bones in the ground in Paris. Go through those catacombs.
Julianne,
That's true.
Yes.
That is 100% true. More bones.
Yes, book ahead. It does sell out, the catacombs. But there's a bar right across the street in case it is sold out, like happened to me.
These are the tips and tricks we need.
All right. I think we have a stable result here.
All right. On to our next topic, Lisa.
Okay. My topic to introduce is art and architecture, which I think is a vital and important part of any sightseer's itinerary, art being something that we can all appreciate, and architecture being an art form that you can move within and around. So we will be starting the art and architecture section of our debate with London. London has these wonderful nooks and crannies, and the variety of architecture is stunning. So you can imagine walking through these half-timbered alleyways. There's a fantastic company called London Walks that does walking tours, and they probably have 50 different itineraries. And every time I'm in London, I go on one of their walking tours and I find another little hidden corner of London. So because London was never renovated, or as my friend Julianne likes to say, whitewashed by Napoleon III in Paris, there is a beautiful array of architectural styles. You can cruise down these half-timbered alleys, as I mentioned. You can scoot over to the neo-Gothic Elizabeth Tower, where Big Ben, the bell tolls the hour. And then right next to it, you have the Gothic Cathedral of Westminster, which I think we've all seen the inside of due to various royal events. And I would just like to point out that Westminster was started in the 10th century. So it's almost 400 years older than Notre Dame, but still has these fabulous flying buttresses. Next door, you can go to the Houses of Parliament. You can actually tour the political workings of the government. Julianne, you did this not that long ago. What'd you think?
Yes, I've done this tour twice because it was like Disneyland for me. They take you through Parliament, the Parliament building, and you get to visit the House of Commons and the House of Lords, which is where they still do their governing today. And it was fascinating and cool, really cool to see that.
And then because Paris was basically razed in some parts to get rid of all of the medieval alleyways so that the rebels couldn't overthrow the government again, down with people in Paris. So in London, you have this variety with all of these different colors and all of these different styles of their 19th century architecture. And then hands down, London has the best and most funnily nicknamed modern architecture anywhere. So going from the right, you have the gherkin, which is English for pickle. So you can see that. And then in the middle, you have at 122 Leadenhall Street, you have the cheese grater. So it's kind of triangular. It looks like you can grate cheese. And then one of the newer ones, and my favorite, is 20 Fenchurch Street, which is known as the walkie-talkie. And I think it's fun because of the shape, but also at the top, there's something called the Sky Garden, which is free, like so many of London's sites are. It's free. All you have to do is make an online reservation, and then you have this beautiful view all across the city of London. So I think London architecture spans the centuries.
And London art also spans the centuries. This here is in the Victoria and Albert Museum, as Lisa mentioned earlier, where you have the beautiful piece by Chihuly with the older designs in the background. And this is something that you'll get a lot of in London. Is there's a variety in buildings. We just keep saying variety because that's what I love most about London. And you have a big variety in art. For example, here at the Tate, you have some pre-Raphaelite masterpieces. This one, Ophelia. And you go from that to Monet's. Paris isn't the only place that has these works by these great artists. And you go from Monet to Van Gogh, Jan Vinnick, I think is how you pronounce his name, the Arnolfini portrait. Where's this one? Is this in the National Gallery?
This is in the National Gallery.
National Gallery. You have the British Museum, of course, just so many options to see great art. And you can even see Da Vinci when you're in London. And Lisa, I'm curious, how much does it cost to see these pieces?
Oh, that would be £0. These are all free. The British government considers them part of their patrimony, so they are free for all.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you, Julianne and Lisa. Thank you, Gabe. Well, Paris is certainly home to some of the most impressive art museums in the world. The Louvre contains many of the best-known works as well, including the Mona Lisa and the Venus de Milo. And at any one time in the Louvre, there are some 40,000 objects on display. Along with the Louvre, the Orsay Museum stuns with its massive collection of Impressionist works, particularly from the 20th century. Impressionist, post-impressionist masterpieces from Renoir, Degas. Sure, London has some of these, but the Orsay collection is much more significant. It is estimated that Paris, in fact, has the most museums of any city in the world, with around 300 compared to London's roughly 200. So if you like museums, Paris is the city for you.
I'll also point out that London might have a Monet or two, but if you want to be surrounded by his serene water lilies, you have to go to the Orangerie in Paris. And as I mentioned when discussing Père Lachaise Cemetery, Paris is not only home to many of the world's greatest artworks and art museums, it has also been a magnet for some of the greatest names in art history and nurtured some of art history's greatest minds. I need my notes for this one because over the centuries, Paris has been called home by Claude Monet, Pablo Picasso, Edgar Degas, Marc Chagall, Auguste Rodin, Paul Gauguin, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Georges Seurat, and many more. And Paris herself was a muse for many of these artists and the subject of their paintings. Meanwhile, Paris also housed a thriving literary community, including the likes of Oscar Wilde, James Joyce, Gertrude Stein, Ernest Hemingway, James Baldwin, and Victor Hugo, to name a few. And while these artists may have been born in different places and be claimed as heroes by other countries, there's one undeniable fact that they all hold in common, and that is that they all chose Paris. They recognized Paris as a thriving hub of creativity and flocked there to express their artistic impulses.
Well said, Gabe. Now, Paris has fantastic examples of architecture from every period. Julianne and Lisa spent some time discussing modern architecture. I appreciate modern architecture. I'm sure many of our fellow travelers do. I don't go to Europe for modern architecture. Do you, Gabe?
No.
I go to Europe for local, traditional, national architecture, something different than what I had at home, because we have a good amount of modern architecture.
Plenty in Seattle.
And in the US at large. So Paris is in some ways the birthplace of Gothic architecture. And here we have the 12th century Notre Dame as its finest example. It also has great architecture in the Art Nouveau and classical style. However, central Paris is famous for the Haussmann style. During the era of Emperor Napoleon III, Haussmann took down much of central medieval Paris and reconstructed the city with wide avenues, new squares, new buildings, new parks, new fountains. The so-called Haussmann apartment buildings, as you see here, line many central Parisian streets today and are truly ubiquitous structures. I personally love the look and appearance of the chimneys and the roof line. It creates a unique Parisian appearance that you really just cannot find anywhere else. And that's why I love traveling to Paris. It's very unique.
And in Paris, art isn't just lining the halls of museums or standing on street corners. It moves through the streets. Parisians don't just admire art, they wear it. Earlier, I mentioned some of Paris's nicknames, and I have an important one to add: fashion capital. Additionally, I listed some of the great artists that lived in Paris, and I have a few more to add to that list. Coco Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, Christian Dior, Hubert de Givenchy, Christian Louboutin. Paris has been home to dozens of influential designers and hosts 2 annual fashion weeks. And even though many of us may never wear these designer clothes, if you've seen Meryl Streep's cerulean sweater monologue in The Devil Wears Prada, you know that the designs that are pioneered here trickle down to all of our wardrobes. So whether you like shopping or just want to see some more interesting architecture, I recommend checking out some of Paris's historic department stores. For example, Le Bon Marché was the world's first department store, opened in 1838, and you can still visit it today. Or you can visit here, the Galeries Lafayette, which pairs shopping with the most exquisite ceiling you will see in your life. Back to you, Lisa and Julianne.
Galeries Lafayette is beautiful, and they have quite a nice little restaurant down in the basement. But the basement is where the Haussmann architecture belongs, because it's... Julianne, you talk about that architecture, because I've already said that it holds down the people.
Well, the Haussmann architecture, it might look nice, but the reality of living there is not so pleasant, because you have the thin floors, the thin walls, the old plumbing. I've known a few people who have stayed in apartments that are in this style, and they are not as in love with them anymore as the travelers might be. Also, I think they took away quite a bit of the character of the city when they took down all of the old medieval buildings to make way for this style. So that's one reason I like London architecture better, because each building has something else to offer and has an interesting history to it.
Proof of that is that one of the neighborhoods that we send the people to the most in Paris is the Marais, which wasn't Haussmannified. Of the 300 museums in Paris and the 200 museums in London that you mentioned, Ben, I would say that in Paris, the focus is on art, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in London, there's something for everyone. There's a transportation museum. There's a furniture museum. There's a bug collecting museum. Anything you can think of in London, there's a museum for that. And the most recent one is a museum, well, maybe not the most recent, but that is a townhouse that was lived in by Jimi Hendrix and I think Haydn. You guys help me out. The classical composer Haydn. I mean, we haven't even talked about the art that is music. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Rick's favorite. I mean, you can't deny that that's art.
French
and it's
opera.
on the streets. French opera.
Can you name
And
one
while
French opera, Gabe?
while a bug museum sounds great, we are discussing art and architecture. And Lisa said herself, if you want art, Paris is where you go.
Well, there's an art to insect taxidermy. Also, bringing back to music, I would say that, sure, you have these grand museums in Paris. However, I wouldn't be able to afford to go see all of them because they are so expensive. And you say all of these great artists who flocked to Paris, sure, it was an inspiration at the time. But if you think of the musicians, I think that's an even more important piece of the puzzle, because they were inspired by this city, and music is accessible for everyone. It's not the fashion of Paris that costs thousands of dollars and not everyone can wear. And music moves the soul.
Everybody can enjoy Obla Di Obla Da.
And you know, we should look up the story of some of these British castles, because you're saying Haussmann architecture of 1870s and 80s is holding down the people. I think we should look up some British castle history and see what really holds down the people.
I think we
Oh,
agreed that
Ben,
both
Ben,
the
you-
British and the French did plenty of
Well,
holding down in their histories.
Let's let the people speak now.
Okay,
Let's let the
but
people speak.
Napoleon III built those wide boulevards
Bring
so
it
that
to a
people
vote.
couldn't rise up against them and barricade them. The whole musical play Les Miserables is about that.
All right, here we go. Art and architecture.
By Victor Hugo.
The people will decide.
Now, will you sing part of it, Gabe?
Oh, I dreamed a dream of times gone by.
Beautiful.
Julianne will have to do a performance for a future show.
I dreamed that life would be.
All right,
And-
well, log in those art votes. And while you do that, I am going to get us started on our next category, which is one that I am particularly looking forward to, and that is cuisine. So while many people, we love seeing the artworks and hearing the church bells and feeling the sun or rain on our skin, we also taste the places that we visit through their food and drink. In fact, some people even plan entire trips around must-eat cuisines. So we're going to take some time now to explore the different flavors that Paris and London have to savor.
Absolutely. And the identity of France and Paris is very much tied to quality goods. And in particular, that includes quality fine wine and fine dining. Wine is truly a source of national pride for France and a mainstay of households. France is the second largest producer of wine in the entire world. And tonight we are drinking a very good Beaujolais. Cheers, Gabe.
Chin chin, Ben.
Chin chin. And to all of our fellow travelers. Wonderful. French wine, like what we are enjoying now, reflects the terroir, the soil, the location of its production. In fact, French wines are not labeled by grape variety, but by the winery or the area of their production. The French take their food very seriously, and that includes dining out. Paris has 113 Michelin stars among its restaurants compared to London's 69, which is quite remarkable because London has a population, 3 times, 4 times the size of Paris? The French take their time with food as well. When you get a table, you are entitled to stay there for the evening to enjoy, talk, savor the moment. London's more busy culture of eating does not lend itself to such a fine experience.
And if you don't want to splurge on a Michelin star meal, I have good news. Casual dining in Paris can be equally atmospheric and delicious. Paris has many quaint eateries and bistros, such as this one where I found a ratatouille on my first trip to Paris. I was so eager to try that traditional dish. But also I can say that in Paris, the stereotype of coming home from work or a long day of travel with a baguette tucked under your arm is absolutely true. I've enjoyed many lovely picnics after a trip to the Corner Boulangerie in Paris, and I was not alone. Here is a field of French picnickers in the Tuileries Gardens just next to the Louvre, enjoying the joie de vivre in Paris. And of course, so the message is clear. In Paris, eating cheap and eating well are never mutually exclusive. And there's always room for a great dessert, such as the ones that Ben and I are enjoying tonight. I have a raspberry tart and a chocolate eclair. Ben, what do you have?
A croissant and millefeuille.
Millefeuille.
Delicious.
Delicious.
And adding on to this story of French cuisine, Paris, as Gabe beautifully mentioned earlier, is a city of neighborhoods, and local streets contain lively merchants selling fresh products. This scene you see here is a common one and represents the convivial Parisian experience of food shopping. Small run shops specialize in a small number of products, like this delicious cheesemonger you see here. It is a beautiful contrast to the convenient American supermarket and so traditionally French. This provides a level of freshness that is irreplaceable. London cannot compare in the number of local merchants and, or I would say in the level of freshness that you see in these Parisian neighborhoods. Collectively, what results is an assortment of food that prioritizes locality, simplicity, and freshness. I mean, Gabe, who can say no to a spread like this?
I could not, especially that cheese. And in Paris, food isn't just a daily necessity. Rather, Parisians use food to build culture and build community. When I lived in France, I would go to the Sunday market with my host mom, and we would buy cherries and strawberries from this woman who she had been buying cherries and strawberries from for years and years. And then we would go home with my French host family, this is them there, and we would sit down and we would savor that food and savor our time together. France actually has the longest average mealtime in the world. French people eat for more than 2 hours a day, and it's not time tucked between meetings or while they're on the tube. It is something that they do intentionally, and eating is a way of life there, and I've made many strong relationships because of it.
Well, I do have to say that I have enjoyed my fair share of French pastries, but I still find cuisine in London to be superior. And Lisa, do you want to kick things off with us for us?
Well, I would say that Paris really only has one dish that's truly Parisian, and it's the onion soup, which is fine. But you know, Ben, you threw a bombshell saying that London's ingredients are not as fresh. I would like to fact check you on that. But let's go to what London does really, really well, and that is afternoon high tea. There is not a tradition that is more delectable or delightful as going and having a nice high tea in the afternoon in London in between your sightseeing. And one of the things that you really like about it, Julianne, is the type of little sandwiches and desserts that they have.
More importantly, the cake. I love British cakes, and we have some here. I have a nice carrot cake. Lisa has a delicious looking chocolate cake. But as I mentioned before, I do enjoy a good French pastry. However, I am more of a hearty, home-cooked kind of pastry person, like they have in England. You can go to so many different pastry shops or cake shops, and a place where you can get a coffee, and they have just a wide variety of cakes that are all so good. This is a carrot cake up top, a Victoria sponge, and then what looks like just a pound cake down there in the corner. And to me, they're just satisfying and simple, and they don't have as much additional flair as French pastries tend to have that don't really add much substance to the dessert itself. And an afternoon tea is a great way to pass time with your friends or family. You kind of get a rush from the caffeine and a rush from the sugar, and so everyone's just a little bit giddy after a nice afternoon tea. And the breakfasts are nice in England as well. Of course, there's the traditional English breakfast that you may have heard of, but this is just at a coffee shop in the middle of London, and they have great fresh avocado and fruits and vegetables and eggs and avocado toast for the millennial salmon. So pretty much anything you want to get for breakfast. And they're very welcoming of people who have dietary restrictions, a lot of gluten-free options, vegetarian options. These types of things would be a challenge to find in Paris.
And they're so easily marked on the menus.
Yes.
They really take pride in doing that. So in the evening, we turn to handcrafted ales brewed right directly in London. London Pride, they're pulled from casks in the basement by hand. Very friendly people. Something that I always tell my tour members that I want everybody to know is if you want to make new friends, you want to, have a conversation with somebody about local life, then you stand at the bar and then you're sending the signal that you're there to socialize. And if you don't want to, then you go and sit at a table. So pubs are a really important part of daily life. They are the cafe in Paris. The pubs are the public houses in London. And One of the new trends is gastropubs. So these are pubs where they have specifically determined to take new and innovative takes on traditional British cuisine. And you can see there's some mussels in the little dish. They get fantastic seafood in London. And Julianne, this is your picture. So what's this orchiette?
Yes, this was at a gastropub in London. And that is truly the pasta there on the front. One of the best pastas I've ever had in my life. It was a butternut squash pasta, and it was delicious.
And being the capital of a former empire that spanned the globe, variety again is something that we keep talking about, because some of the best Indian restaurants anywhere in the world are in London, and chicken tikka masala is the #1 most popular dish. So that is eating local when you go to London. And then because of this former empire, you have fabulous markets for one thing, but you also have street food from all over the globe. And so this is, I think she's having paella, so she's having Spanish food. But these wonderful markets are really a festival of food, a festival of tastes.
And the difference between the markets in Paris and the markets in London, to me, I've seen one Paris market and I've seen them all. They're all just, sure, it's fresh ingredients. That's great. However, they're just the local produce that you'll find.
Yes, to replace grocery
Yes.
stores. They're not doing anything festive or fun.
Yeah. Well, in
It's
London, yeah, like at the Borough Market, I don't know what I'm going to get. It's exciting to go there. They have different cheeses from different vendors around London and just outside of London. They have more international foods to try. And here you can pick up a snack with tastes from around the world. And it's just a place where everyone can appreciate different cultures through the food, which I think is neat and exciting, and a great way to pick up a picnic at a market in London. They can make something even like a grilled cheese sandwich exciting. So it's fun to
Jeannie
go.
says the best grilled cheese sandwich she's ever had in the world is from Borough Market.
And Gabe, I do have to ask, I noticed you went on a picnic at the Louvre there, but what book were you reading?
No comment. I do have
Night Dream. Yeah.
I do have some comments about your presentation, though. First, I would just like to say that if you love Indian food as I do, good news, I've counted at least 80 in the 40 square miles of London, so you'll never be too far from a dal or a paneer. But as Rick says, when we travel places, we want to become cultural chameleons. We want to take deep dives in the culture. So while variety is great if you're going to live somewhere for a year, many travelers are only going to be in these places for a few days. And so I would rather invest and indulge in a deep, well thought out cuisine like they have in France, eating the escargot and the French onion soup and the pâté and the ratatouille and all of the pastries. So I think that, and you know, there's a reason why Julia Child wrote Mastering the Art of French Cooking and not Mastering the Art of British Cooking. French cooking is embraced as this deep tradition. And the last thing I'll say is that I think all four of us can agree that at Rick Steves Europe, I have the sweetest of sweet tooths. And while I love a nice stodgy piece of cake drenched in cream or custard, to me, it does not measure up. I will take a nicely layered French piece of patisserie any day.
And I would like to add one more point. Julianne, you shared with us your delicious cakes, Lisa as well. You are a great baker, Juliana. I think you know that I'm not half bad. We both know that we can whip up a chocolate cake or a carrot cake at home, no problem. And I suspect many of our traveling viewers here tonight can as well. When I go out to eat or when I travel, I like to have things that either I can't get at home or things that are difficult for me to make myself. And I wish you could see properly the layers in this millefeuille, but it's not like making a chocolate cake. It takes time, energy, and effort, and I would happily go out for one of these before I go out for a chocolate cake.
I'm not going to let you have a bite of my chocolate cake when this is all over, Ben.
Well, we're very generous, so we'll let you have some of our French patisserie since we know you want it. But let's hear what our audience wants. So we are going to launch our poll now. Which destination would you rather travel to for its cuisine? Paris or London?
Can we vote?
Is that those?
Can we vote, Gabe?
I don't know if we can, but I'm a little hungry, Ben. Are you?
It's so
That's what the viewers don't know is
Yeah.
that we skip dinner for these two shows and we're always starving.
You skip
I would
dinner
have to
for
say that while I might not want to make a croissant at home, I still love getting a piece of cake when I'm out, just because it's just more satisfying to me.
Mhm.
I mean, the variety you get in an afternoon tea,
Mhm.
that's not just one cake. That's like 6 different cakes and cucumber
Yes.
sandwiches. And it's such a great way to rest your feet too in the middle of the afternoon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you two still talking? We were.
Yeah, we're talking to our
Wrapped up.
community of viewers.
Just those on our team.
Delicious treats. But all right.
Let's see. It looks
so
like
we
the
are going to.
results are in. All
And
right.
we're going to move on to our final category, Julianne.
Well, another important thing when you are traveling, after you've seen the museums, you've seen the art, you've had some good food, what else is left? Well, entertainment is a very important thing when you're traveling abroad because it allows you to access the culture of a place even more directly. And it's just a lot of great fun to find what is available there in that city. And so in entertainment,
London reigns supreme.
Yeah.
That's just, I love London theater, and you guys are talking about not wanting to, eat something that you could have back at home, and I will take that and twist it a little bit because living in Seattle, we do have plays that come through here, but they are 2 or 3 times more expensive and not as high quality as the London West End Theater. So this is Piccadilly Circus, which is kind of like the Times Square of London, and you can just go a few blocks and you will get to Leicester Square. And Leicester Square has a half-price ticket booth called TKTS, and this is great for day of the show tickets. So what I like to do is the other website that's on your screen right now, londontheatre.co.uk. That's where I will look first for my tickets, a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance. And I'll admit I'm a little bit shallow. There is a tab on that website that says Stars on Stage. So I will click on that tab and see if any of my favorite movie or TV actors are playing in something. Once I saw Matthew Perry and Hank Azaria and Minnie Driver in a play, and I was in the front row, and I got that in advance. But then on the other days, I might just go by the TKTS booth and see what's on the push list for the day because it's so good. The West End quality, a lot of the plays are coming, from Broadway, or they're going to end up going to Broadway. This is probably about 6 years ago now. This was Bradley Cooper in The Elephant Man, and he had just won like a few Tony Awards, or the play had just won a few Tony Awards. And I paid about $55 for a ticket. And that same ticket on Broadway, I think, would have probably been $200. So London theater is fantastic. The other website that I mentioned in the links that you're going to get tomorrow is timeout.com. And this is where the language barrier, again, is advantageous to London because you can go to plays, you can go to comedy clubs, you can go to, I was going to say dance halls, but I've never been to a dance hall in London. But if you can read what's going on in the city, and Christmas markets. London has like 30 different Christmas markets that go on this time of year, and the pantomimes. So I would really recommend doing some research into that before your trip.
Mm-hmm. And there's also the Globe Theater where you can see live performances. When you're standing on the ground there, you're called a groundling. And that was the case in the original Globe Theater as well. And tickets are inexpensive. You do have to be standing up the whole time, but it's an experience just like it was, again, 400 years ago. So that's pretty neat. And you can see more traditional performances, or they kind of put a spin on classics. So there's always something new going on there. And just walking around the streets of London, you'll run into free entertainment like the changing of the guards at Buckingham Palace every morning. And it's a neat sight to see the live music and everything. And there's little signs that tell you information about the different outfits that they're wearing, which is cool. And in the Royal Albert Hall, they have classical music performances there, a whole range of things that you can see. So that's also a great option. And free music in the parks. There's often free music in Kensington and Hyde Park, right there in the heart of London. And I think an entertainment factor in a city is also just walking around their parks, taking a stroll. You can rent a bike and go through the parks in London. And I do prefer the parks in London because they do kind of have more of a romantic feel. Surprisingly, the gardens in Paris are much more symmetrical and rigid, which is kind of the French gardening style, while the English style of gardening is much more of a natural feel. So I prefer walking around the parks in London. And you could just grab a book and go sit under a tree instead of just being exposed in the sun in the Parisian parks.
All right. Well, as Lisa mentioned, I probably need two hands to count the number of plays that I've seen in Seattle this year. But I cannot say that I've seen many can-cans. While Paris by day is known for its stately museums and fine foods, Paris after dark is known for its gritty and exuberant nightlife. One great example of this is the Moulin Rouge, founded in 1889, which pioneered the modern can-can that then spread all around cabarets throughout Europe. While originally the high kicks were performed by these seductive courtesans, today's show is a little bit more polished. They have nightly shows every night at 9 o'clock, or you can go for a nice, long, luxurious Parisian dinner at 7 before the show. So in Paris, there's just more, while London, so much of the nightlife is nice and polished like the West End and the Shakespeare plays. If you really want to let loose, I recommend going to Paris. There's a lot of great gritty nightlife in the Marais district, but I will let you find those places on your own.
You know, Paris also abounds with opportunities to see classical music performed live. From March to November, several Paris churches regularly host concerts. The Philharmonie de Paris, a beautiful 2,400-seat concert hall, also hosts many world-class artists. However, one pinnacle venue I would highly recommend are concerts in Sainte-Chapelle, which you see here, where you can listen to Mozart, Bach, or Vivaldi, surrounded by this beautiful 800-year-old stained glass. I think it's one of the finest concert venues settings anywhere. Now, Paris is also a great holiday destination. The city grows festive with upwards of 20 or more Christmas markets selling things like mulled wine, cheese, truffles, and waffles. The City of Light, as you see here, also grows even lighter with more decorations. Now, Boulevard Haussmann is filled with many lovely light displays. This illuminated canvas has some 150,000 lights. Naturally, chocolate and pastries grow even further in popularity around the holidays. Paris is a fantastic Christmas time destination, no matter the weather. The French actually have a term which roughly translates to as window licking. And these fine patrons here are practicing that art. It refers to window and display shopping. The French have really perfected it. So I'd recommend all of you, any time of year in Paris, but especially during the holidays, practice a little bit of window licking to see even more of the fine quality Parisian goods.
But I always feel like in the end, Paris' greatest pleasures are its simplest. In my opinion, no time in Paris can be better spent than strolling through its beautiful parks, along its pedestrianized boulevards, or along the banks of the Seine. In fact, the banks of the Seine are so beloved that they were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, something that cannot be claimed by the Thames. Another option, actually in our Paris guidebook, Rick has an activity that you can do in the evening. You can tear out a page, give it to your Uber driver, and you will go on an evening tour of all the floodlit sites in Europe. So no matter where you are in Paris, just being in the city, you can see why it is the city of lights and the city of love.
Well, I would have to say if my choices of entertainment for the evening were the can, the Moulin Rouge, I would just be asking, can I see something else?
It's
Okay,
really sort
points
of
for
a
the
cultural
fun.
cliche. You
Points
won't
for
find
the
a lot of
fun.
French people inside. Sorry, it was our
Cliches
rebuttal
exist
time.
for a reason. Another great French word, cliche.
It's true. Well, I would also say one of the reasons I love London is that unlike Paris that has the same things kind of done over and over again, like the can, you know what you're going to get when you're going to Paris. In London, there's always something new and exciting. And that's why I like going back there again and again, like with the entertainment. Oh, what show is going on tonight? What music will they have in this area? And it's just an exciting place to go.
I agree, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And
All right,
shopping,
well,
I'll just comment on shopping. Sure, they have lèche vitrine or window licking in Paris. However, I'd much rather spend my time doing something other than shopping when I'm out traveling. There's much more to a culture than just shopping.
why not do it all?
Well, you also have to shop for your theater tickets, Julie. You have to shop for your food, shop for your pastry. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
All right, well, let's put it to our viewers, shall we?
Yes. Let me pull it up here. The final subject vote. Let's see.
Ooh.
Paris versus London.
Oh, a nice, who wants to join me on a nice night out in Paris? It's going to be so exciting.
Who wants to go to a show?
See some body dancing, see
Some what now? Did he say body dancing?
Body, B-A-U-D-Y.
Oh, why do you make Paris sound so dirty?
I mean, gritty. It's the good kind of dirty.
Okay.
Well, I would have to say I went to a show on Broadway in New York and the ticket was very expensive. I saw Mamma Mia in London. It was probably under $50. It was
such a good value.
You could go to a show every night.
To be fair, isn't most theater in Europe cheaper? Not just London, like is London special?
We don't know because we don't speak the language. I've never been to a play in Rome.
I mean, I've been to plays in Finland, in Russia, in Poland, and they normally have English subtitles.
So cultured.
Normally English subtitles.
I went to an opera in Russia and it was super titled, but plays, I don't see that so much.
Fair enough.
Right. But we have the results from our second to last voting section.
All right. Thank you so much, Julianne. And now it is time already, I can't believe it, for the closing statements. So this is the last opportunity to hear from both the Parisians and the Londoners about why their city is the best. And Paris will start. So in summary, let's take an honest look at the facts. Paris has 303 metro stations to London's 272. It has 300 museums to London's roughly 200, and it features nearly double the number of Michelin stars among its restaurants. Paris is the birthplace of everything from the Enlightenment to the first written constitution to the can, and has the world's most visited site, the Eiffel Tower. Clearly, Paris ought to be the prevailing destination in this city duel.
But set those facts aside for a minute, because Paris is not a city that you experience with your brain. It's a city that you experience with your heart and with your soul. So close your eyes for a minute and just imagine a day in Paris. Imagine yourself waking up in your quaint little hotel room along the Rue Claire and going downstairs for a fresh, flaky croissant and a nice hot coffee. You walk out onto the street and maybe pick up a snack at the local market. You walk past Napoleon's tomb on your way to the Rodin Museum, where you spend the morning admiring the marbled embraces of the sculptures and maybe have your snack beside the thinker. You then zip on a quick metro ride to central Paris, where you wander through the Louvre or the Orsay or shop along the Champs-Élysées. You then follow the smell of warm bread and the sound of forks clinking on plates to the corner boulangerie, where you pick up a baguette to enjoy as a picnic in the Tuileries Gardens with the Parisians. In the evening, you go to the Eiffel Tower at sunset, looking out over the city as the lights begin to glimmer on. And then you go for a nice evening stroll before finishing with some fine French wine and a fine French meal. Now, that feeling is the reason that Paris is the greatest city in Europe.
I feel so emotionally manipulated right now. That feeling. I would just like to say, as somebody who has been to Paris 55 times in their life, that the reality of the density and the crowds in Paris is slightly less, or more than slightly less, romantic than what you lead on, whereas London has room for everyone. London has something for everyone. I would wake up in the morning out of my little B&B run by that sweet little lady, and I would go down and have my big traditional English breakfast, which would set me up for the day. I'd head straight over to the Tower of London to get in line, maybe 20 or 30 minutes before they open, so I can go straight to the crown jewels, because, you know, they went with their heads in Paris and they don't have the jewels so much in the Louvre. So go to the Tower of London, and then, being an American, I would grab a great sandwich from the little pret-a-manger deli that's right there and eat it while I'm on my river cruise going down the Thames to Westminster Abbey and Westminster Pier. And then I would take a walking tour up to Trafalgar Square, pop into the National Gallery for free, see a Da Vinci, see a Monet, see a Van Gogh, bada bing, bada boom, I'm out of there. And then I'm headed to an afternoon high tea with beautiful little cakes and petit fours and fabulous cucumber sandwiches. And then I'm going to go to a West End show before I top it off with one big circle around the London Eye on the South Bank before I go to sleep.
That sounds like a beautiful day. And I think when Gabe talks about the feeling of each cities, I would say, when I think of Paris and a day I might spend there, it is a comfortable day. It's a familiar day. It's the same day when you go there. It's a nice day, but it's going to be a similar day every time. While when I go to London, it's like a city you can grow with. You're different each time you go. The city's different each time you go. And it's that feeling of excitement and seeing the unexpected when you're in London is why it is my preferred city.
All right. Well, thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much, Julianne. Hard to believe, but now we're on to the final vote. After hearing comments from both Team London and Team Paris, it is time for all of you, our fellow travelers, to give your overall impression. And you're welcome to do it separate from whatever your votes were earlier in each section.
Mm-hmm. All right. And while you all do that, we are going to have a quick word from our sponsor before we reveal today's vote. And when I first started traveling in Europe, the first way that I got to know Rick Steves Europe was through our guidebooks. In fact, Paris was the first place that I ever used a Rick Steves Europe guidebook. And I joke about it a lot in the office that I did not know that we had a TV show until my first day working here. It's these guidebooks that were my introduction to the company. And I would say if I trusted these before, now knowing Rick and Cameron and Jean and all of our guidebook researchers and editors, I think the world of them even more. And in particular, we're taking our debate hats off now. Both London and Paris are incredible cities. Our researchers did a fantastic job diligently researching these over the past year for all of the changes that happened since the beginning of COVID. And both of these were updated and released in September 2022. So if you're thinking of going to either of these incredible cities in 2023, I highly recommend picking up one of these guidebooks. It really is like having a tour guide in your pocket. So with that, I believe that voting has officially closed. Our overseer of elections, Julianne, is quickly working away on them. But Lisa and Ben, do you remember the first time that you used a Rick Steves Europe guidebook?
It was to Paris. It was to Paris, and a waiter made me cry. Maybe that's why I'm Team London.
Well, for me, it was in Krakow, where I studied as an undergrad, and we have some very good milk bar recommendations in the Krakow Warsaw Gdansk snapshot. So when in Poland, go to a milk bar.
Well, I do have the results here, Gabe. Should I share them for everyone?
Yes, please do. Here we go.
All right. Well, here are the tallies.
Ooh.
London had a stronger start.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like ease of travel was the closest. London edged us out, but then after that, they weren't that close. History, London, architecture, Paris, cuisine, Paris, entertainment, London.
We came back strong, though, with entertainment. So there's a chance. Okay, are you guys ready?
Okay, we are ready.
Ready?
Who is the winner?
And it is
Paris.
Que
magnifique.
Taking my crown off now.
Yes. And we mentioned in the beginning that we would share Rick's favorite city, and his favorite city between the two of them is, in fact, Paris, the winner of tonight.
We will also reveal our favorite cities that actually collectively between the four of us, all four of us have a slight preference for London. So Ben and I were arguing against, though after researching and arguing for Paris, I am leaning a bit more towards it. But maybe it's what you said, Julianne, is that sometimes Paris, you get this iconic thing, but London, going back time and time again, maybe there is more variety. But two excellent destinations.
All right. Well, next week on Monday Night Travel, Gabe will be hosting with our excellent guide, Federico, as they travel to Madrid, so you can warm up in this cold December. And the week after, if you have a special place in your heart for the European Christmas show, like many of us do, Rick will be sharing the European Christmas show episode, and it will be a great show before the holidays.
Federico is delightful. That'll be excellent.
Yes, we are going to have a very fun time exploring Madrid. I'm quite excited.
And I'd like to say thank you to all of our fellow travelers who joined us for this debate. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you all very much, and hope that you can get to both Paris and London soon. Au revoir. Cheerio.
Bonsoir.